How's it going, guys? I am back from my road thrift trip and it was amazing. It was a ton of fun. I'm going to show you in this video some of the awesome things that I was able to get while I was on my trip. Had some amazing scores. In fact, some that I've talked about in Bellows in the past, but I've come across on this trip. And so you've got to check it out. Stay tuned. It's awesome. Here we go. All right. So one of the things we talked about on the podcast with this trip is a big part of it was vacation. It was hanging out, it was spending time with family. And, that plays an impact in how much money you're going to make. If you're spending time, going to some fun places, not using the whole thing as a work trip, you're not going to make quite as much money. But I was still able to get a lot of things in my trailer. I think more than paid for my trip plus some, which is super awesome. Part of the doing the vacation, we were able to go see some family, which was awesome, spend some time with family. We went to some really cool places. We went to a zoo, which was awesome because my son was able to feed some giraffes, which is an experience that I've never had. And so just getting to watch him do that was really cool. We also went to some really deep caves and we're underground in Colorado in some caves. And that was a lot of fun. And he was like a little tour guide, chirping the whole time, talking about how spooky it was, but he had a blast and it was a lot of fun. Just being deep underground. We went to the Great Wolf Lodge and spent a night there and just got to enjoy the water park. And we also went and saw some bizarre things. When you're on the road, there was like an alien dinosaur museum kind of weird thing. And so when you're on a road trip, you've got to stop and enjoy, smell the roses. But without further ado, let's get to some of the cool items that I was able to pick up. Right off the bat, one of the really cool items that we picked up was this John Deere sprinkler. Now, I guess these are pretty vintage. They're pretty old. When I was actually paying for it at the thrift store, the lady at the thrift store says, I haven't seen one of these in years. And she showed the other guy and called him over. And he said the same thing. He's like, wow, this is so cool. I had one of these when I was a kid. So I'm assuming these are pretty old. I never had one, but I picked it up for just a couple of bucks. And, the comps are really high for these. A lot of them are in much better condition than mine is in, but it has this really cool vintage look. I think it would look cool in somebody's yard, just set up, or in somebody's house. And maybe if you're into restoration, you could do a little bit of restoration work. But for a couple of bucks, this should be easily, an $80 to $100 net profit. It took up some space, but I have my trailer, so no big deal there. Speaking of driving the trailer, one of the things that we were a little bit worried about was what was parking going to be like. We noticed when we were in California, stopping at gas stations, trying to find parking was a little bit more challenging. But as soon as we got out of California, it was much easier on these highways to find parking, to find gas stations that were easy to pull into. I'm not a truck driver. I'm impressed by what a lot of these people do. But even in small towns where we had to park for thrift stores, we were able to find parking pretty regularly. We even went to Waco and got to see the Chip and Joanna Gaines. I think it's called the Silos. My wife was really into that. We found parking every single place we went to, which is really cool. We found some thrift stores that I've never seen before. I've heard people talk about ARC thrift stores before. We saw one of those, which was actually right next door to I think it was Shirley's, like a little mom and pop shop. And so they were like competition. They were just right across the street from each other. I picked up at one of these, I think it was the ARC shop. I picked up a puzzle, American flag puzzle, 1776. Would have been great for 4th of July, but it'll probably still sell before then. But if I have to hold on to it till 4th of July, paying a couple bucks for a puzzle, being able to sell it usually for $20, $25 is a really, really good find. Another great find that we had was this Saris, I think Saris is how you pronounce it, bike rack. Now, this bike rack is a hitch bike rack. So it goes into a hitch like you would pull a trailer in, and it holds 4 bikes. And this is a brand I hadn't seen before. I've done, Thule, and there's a couple of other brands that are pretty popular. But I saw this brand. I picked it up for, I think, $15, $14.99, something like that. And I'm planning on doing this one locally just because it's big, it's heavy, it won't be fun to ship. I probably could sell it. I mean, you can see here there's some eBay comps for similar ones, but if I go locally, it's cash. Someone comes, picks it up. I don't have to deal with the shipment and all the fees, so that'll be really, really nice. So keep an eye out for this brand, Saris. If you haven't seen it before, here it is. And it will do pretty well. And speaking of cycling stuff, because I do a little bit of cycling, I'm definitely not a professional or even an amateur by any means. I'm just kind of a hobbyist. But I picked up a Cannondale jacket, like a windbreaker type jacket. And if you don't know, this is a good cycling brand. It's very popular. A lot of the big cycling groups are sponsored by Cannondale. So picked up this windbreaker and also picked up a Callaway windbreaker at the same place. And they were only charging, I think, like $2.99 for their jackets, which is a great price, especially when you get these sports type jackets. They tend to do really well because people are looking for these brands. And of course, lots and lots of shoes. We picked up more clogs. We picked up a lot of different types of shoes. But one of the really cool shoes that we picked up were more Doc Martens. If you watch my previous video, which is here or somebody, I don't know, I'll put it somewhere. But we picked up some Doc Martens, and we actually picked up, I probably think, 4 or 5 pairs of Doc Martens. These ones are really cool because they are blue or a bluish color, and I haven't really seen any of these here in San Diego. So I picked up these for a really good price. The Doc Martens were almost always under $10, which is really good. Because they tend to flip pretty high. And I also picked up these Timberland boat shoes. And I do really well on boat shoes. I've done Sperry topsiders. I've done Timberland before. I've done another brand. I can't recall off the top of my head at the moment. But Sebago, that's what it was. Sebago topsiders. So if you can find boat shoes tend to do well. Obviously check comps. But, you know, shoes tend to be a bread and butter item for us. Also picked up this really cool Woods Down vest. This is an old vintage Canadian brand. There's not a lot of comps for this, but all of the comps that I do see, most of them are jackets. They're not vests, but they sell pretty high. I saw some vests selling or some jackets selling for upwards of a couple $100, some for $100. And I didn't see very many vests. This is a down vest. It's really nice. And unfortunately, there's a little bit of a mark on the side, like a little bit of like a white marking, and I just rubbed my fingernail on it to see, is this a stain or is this just something on there? And it kind of scraped off, so I think this will just be a quick, rub some water on there and scrub it off, and it should come off. And if you haven't seen this brand, Woods, Canadian brand, check it out. It's definitely a Bellow. Now I've got my really big Bellow, my really big score coming up here in just a moment, so hang tight. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was a pitfall we had during the trip. So if you listen to our most recent podcast, you already heard this story, and I'm just going to give a quicker version of it. But while we were in Texas, and when we parked in Texas, we realized that the tread of our tire was ripping off. We saw it on one of the tires. Luckily, there was a Tractor Supply shop not too far, so I was able to pick up a replacement, and I paid more for it. I ended up paying $90 for this tire instead of the $50 that I was able to pick up this tire for before. So I paid up a little bit, but it's a higher speed braking tire, so I was sure that it would actually help us get all the way home and we wouldn't deal with the tread ripping off. I'm just glad the tread didn't fully rip off or we didn't have a blowout on the road, especially because you're pulling a trailer, and if something happens, it could be dangerous. The car can maybe go out of control. So make sure that if you're going to do a trip like this, that you get really good tires. I bought mine on eBay, which I got a good deal, but I didn't know enough about tires to get the right kind. I mean, it was the right kind. They just weren't rated for high enough speed. But the bummer was, I ended up checking the other tire, which it looked fine, but when we pulled the trailer forward, where it was sitting on the ground was where the bald spot was and where tread had ripped off. So we had to go back to Tractor Supply, and it was an up and down. They didn't have the right one. We looked for it and we dug through, and I found one after a little bit of searching. It was kind of underneath some other tires. So I ended up having to pick up 2, but I had no problems getting home. The tires look still brand new. So it was one of those things where it was a bummer. Took, a little bit of time to deal with going out to Tractor Supply and getting new tires and putting them on. But it's part of the experience. I mean, you can't have a road trip without a couple of pitfalls. We didn't have any other malfunctions or issues, so not too bad at all. And finally, my really big find, which was really cool, went into this thrift store, which had this really cool thing I didn't realize until I was checking out. But they have so many books that I guess the first 10 books that you get each day are free. I didn't know that, and so I didn't look through the books that much. And I don't really sell tons of books, so But if I lived in this area of Texas, it's definitely something I would be doing a lot more often, is scanning books. But while I'm in this thrift store, I end up seeing these boxes, and I'm not 100% sure what they are. I just see like names on the side, Sylvania, Phillips. So I look at the SKU number that are on the side, and I start typing in information, and I realize they're bulbs. And these bulbs go for a ton of money. Some of them are 12 packs, some of them are 24 packs, some of them are 60 pack boxes, all brand new. Some of them are old bulbs, but they're still brand new in the boxes. And they didn't have any prices on. There were a couple of open boxes. And so I was worried they were trying to sell these individually, but there were a ton of boxes. So I ended up grabbing one of the boxes that was closed, that was worth the most money. And I took it up to the front and I said, hey, how much money can or how much are you asking for these lights? And the lady said, I don't know, there's usually a sign. So she looked back, she didn't see a sign. And then she says, she asked a couple people and couldn't really find an exact number to use. So she found one of the boxes, or one of the open boxes, had a number on it, and it said $2.99 or $3.99. I can't remember which one. I think it was $3.99, $2.99. Either way, super cheap. And so she came back and she said each box is that price, $2.99, $3.99, something like that. And so I went through and I found the ones that weren't damaged, and I picked up 13 boxes. I think there's a total of 4 different types of bulbs in these boxes, so several of each one. And I'm thinking on the low end, I should be netting at least $100 profit off each one of these boxes. Some of them potentially more. These might be long tail items. I'm seeing that on comps on these bulbs. Each 90-day period, there's maybe 10 or 12 sold, or sometimes boxes of 12 are lotted together. So it might be a little bit of a long tail on this, but because I picked them up at such a cheap price, it was definitely worth it. And I was a little worried that it was going to fill up a ton of my trailer. But as you can see, I got these boxes inside of my trailer, and there's still a ton of room. I have a couple of empty totes that are mostly empty towards the front because I've got weights in them, which don't take up a ton of room. So I could fit a whole lot more in this, but this was in Texas towards the end of our trip. We're going to be heading home, stopping at a couple more stores, which we picked up a few more things, and it was easy to shove some stuff in the trailer. So this small 4x6 trailer fit way more than I was expecting it to fit. And, I think overall it was a very, very profitable trip. We'll make a ton of money, and definitely something we're going to do again in the future. If you haven't done a road trip yet, and you haven't, something you're considering doing, definitely do it. It's fun. Make it fun, but make it work too, and you will definitely profit. Anyways, you guys are awesome. I hope you guys have a great day. Peace.